Welcome to part 4 of our Sci-Fi Crate tutorial. Last time I neglected to save my file, and as a result some of these little trim bits were not in my file. So I went ahead and recreated them, and then I renamed them. So last time I think I called this top box. I just changed it to T-box low. And then these little tiny box, what have you, I'm not sure what they are exactly. I just called them T-box trim _ low. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab both of these and assign them to their display layer, which I don't believe I did in the last tutorial, but if I did, we're revisiting it. If you want to add something new to a display layer, you just grab those assets, either in the outliner or you can just grab them in the OpenGL view, and then go over here to your display layers and push the last button. That is going to create a display layer for whatever objects you have selected. So I'm going to go ahead and name it real quick. I'll just call it T-box layer and save. So now they're inside their own layer, and I'm going to go ahead and grab both of them. So remember, you click, hold down shift and click again, and that'll grab multiple assets, and then a middle mouse click and drag it into the low crate group. That way when I grab the group, it grabs everything. Okay? Alright, so last time we basically finished up the low poly modeling, and when we went and clicked the group and pressed 3 for smooth display, so it kind of gives us a preview of what things are going to look like when we smooth them, it's not ideal. It looks a little bit like melted ice cream or like an inflatable version of this crate. It doesn't quite look like what we want it to look like. So I'm going to press 1 and turn that display off, and what we're going to need to do is have a version of this that has reinforced edges, what we would call fencing. And we're going to fence the edges so as to make it so that when it smooths, it maintains this really nice geometric shape that we have going on. So to get started with that, I'm going to click on this low poly group and I'm going to press Command D, or if you're on a PC, Control D. And as you can see in the outliner, we now have a low poly group and a low poly group with the number 1 next to it. If we grab the new version of the crate and we move it backward in the z-axis, you can see that there are 2 separate crates now in our scene. And what's really nice about waiting till now to duplicate, that everything's in these display layers, the duplicates will maintain that relationship with the display layer, so it's still going to be super easy to turn things off and navigate our assets. Another cool thing is that if I go ahead and put this back to 0, I can grab my other low poly group and just turn off the visibility. That way, if I grab my new group and I move it backward, you'll see that the original low poly group is gone. In the outliner, if I click off, you can see that the current group that's visible is fully listed here in white, and the low poly group is somewhat transparent. You can't quite see it. So if I click on this and I type in visibility on in the channel box, you can call it back. But I don't want it on, so I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to click the low poly crate group, and I'm going to go to visibility and type in, oh, not off, sorry, autopilot there. I'm going to go to translate Z and type in 0, and that's going to recenter it. It's really important that our assets remain centered. That's going to help when it comes to baking maps later on down the road. So I'm going to double click on this new group and I'm going to name it, because I'm really big on keeping things organized in the outliner in your scene. May not matter tremendously with such few objects in our scene, but the more populated it gets, the more important it gets, and especially when we export those FBX files and we're interested in breaking things apart and baking maps, this is going to become really important. I'm going to go ahead and go down here and just rename some of these assets with the suffix of high, and it's important that we remain consistent and keep everything lowercase. Not the whole title, but the suffix needs to be lowercase. So buckles, high, and again, when we get into later tutorials further down the road on this project, you will see why this is so important. Okay, so now we've got this crate high group. And right now it's not high poly, and let's go ahead and start changing that. And let's begin with the crate itself. So I'm going to turn off the visibility on all of these groups, and now I'm only focused on the crate. Now, I could, while I am reinforcing these edges, I could be going through and making sure that when I loop edges on one side of the crate that I'm paying close attention to the other side of the crate. But in this instance, I really want to make sure that I'm not adding more work to my plate. So what I'm going to do is approach this in a similar fashion as when I was modeling the crate. I'm going to go ahead and chop it up. So I'm going to first begin by shift right clicking and going into, sorry, I got to grab first, shift right click and going into my insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to go into properties and I'm going to ask that it activate the multiple edge loops and set the number to 1. That way I can cut this in half, boom, evenly. And I'm going to go once more over here so that I'm actually just dealing with 1/4 of the crate. So let's go ahead and go into my top view, or I'm sorry, my front view. Let's chop this half off, delete, spacebar, and let's look at this from the side, and we'll just chop this side off. And now, when I spacebar and go back, I only have 1/4 of my crate to worry about. So that's just going to save me some work or accidentally missing any edges down the road. Alright, so let's begin reinforcing, fencing some of these edges, shall we? I'm going to grab that insert edge loop tool again, and this time I'm going to reset the tool so that it behaves the way it was intended to behave in default mode. And I'm just going to grab this edge and drag my edge loop close to reinforcing this vertical edge of the crate. Remember, if we click on a horizontal edge, it's going to create a vertical edge loop when we activate the tool. So I'm going to click here and do the same thing. I'm really focused on reinforcing this corner by adding an edge on each side, much like the can model that we did in exercise 1. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this vertical line and bring this up so that, you know, this corner is fully reinforced, okay? Now I'm going to press on the Q button, which activates the select tool. I'm going to click off of everything. I can press F8 to put us back into object mode, and I'm going to press 3 for display and click off. As you can see, that is a far cry from what we had before. So much better than this. So yeah, that's what reinforcing the edge loops is going to look like for us. So just so that you can juxtapose it, this is an reinforced corner. This is a nice reinforced corner. In fact, let's turn off that wireframe on shading. Whew, yeah, that is so much closer to what we want. But we are not done yet. We got a long ways to go. Let's go ahead and, oops, sorry, grabbed the wrong thing. Let's go on wireframe on shading again. And let's just start reinforcing more and more of these corners. So I'm going to click on this, press 1, and I'm going to just kind of go down this edge to kind of keep track of where I'm going and where I've been. I'm going to start with these this vertical edge and just keep reinforcing these parts to begin with. So let's go ahead and grab that insert edge loop tool. And remember, this edge over here, this bevel on the box, is quite sharp. So we want to go ahead and insert an edge loop there as well. So just click, remember, click the vertical line so that you have a horizontal edge loop that you're adding. Drag it down, and there you go. We've reinforced the top part of this edge. Let's do it again. Boom. Looks good. Let's press 3. Oh, much better, much better. We don't have to reinforce this because this is just this isn't a corner. Let's go down here and reinforce the lip of this crate. So let's click here and go in here and reinforce the edge. I don't really like how that looks. Let's press undo and get a little closer in there. Now, one cool thing we could do, because we need to reinforce both the edge toward the tip of the lid all the way back here to where the crate is, you know, pushed inward. So one thing I could do is I could double click my insert edge loop tool, go to the multiple edge loops option again, it should be set to 2 still, and just click this this edge that's going inward, and it creates 2 edge loops. Once I've done that, I could grab my scale tool and I could, oh, that's not going to do it. And in fact, I don't know that I'm ready to introduce this concept yet, but let's go for it anyway. So Over here to the right, we have this thing called the Modeler's Toolkit. And typically, when I am in the right workspace mode, because I realized I was in animator mode, let's change this workspace to the Maya Classic. Alright, so now when I grab the Modeler's Toolkit, it stays docked to the right of my screen. The Modeler's Toolkit I haven't really gone into yet because I really wanted you all to be able to use those shortcut menus that's going to expedite your modeling as opposed to just going back and pushing buttons and having to go back into this toolkit. Toolkit is really nice though, and one of the options in the toolkit, besides having easy access to all these modeling tools like at the ready and in one little hub, you also have these cool symmetry tools. And one of the symmetry tools, transform constraints, rather constraints, you have edge slide. And if I click on edge slide and I grab my regular mouse up here and I double click this edge and I grab the move tool, check this out. It's not quite working the way I intended. Let's try grabbing the other axes. There we go, that's a little bit better. So when I grabbed the X, it wasn't quite responding the way I wanted, but if I grab the, or I'm sorry, when I grab the Z, when I grab the X axis, which is this yellow arrow, and push it up, look at that. See how all that edge loop just follows along? It does a really good job of sticking with the geometry instead of being pushed away from it. So that constraint, that edge transform constraint, is a great way for you to basically keep edges in line, especially when they're on an unusual surface, or in this case the edges are wrapped around in different areas. So if I were to just double click this without the edge transform on and I wanted to move it, as you can see, it's not exactly responding the way I'd like it to. This constraint, on the other hand, will ask it to stay within the confines of this edge. So that's great. And I can go ahead and do that again over here and just ask that edge to basically hug closer to the lip of where the crate has been extruded inward. Alright, so I'm going to click off of this and I'll go ahead and turn off this constraint. I always turn off the little constraints I activate just in case I forget they're on and I don't intend them to be, and you know, mess up what I'm doing in the moment. So I'm going to press F8. I'm just going to see how that looks. Press 3. Boom. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Love that. So I can go over here and do a similar thing with my insert edge loop, and because this one is perfectly vertical, I can press my scale tool this time and check that out. Boom. Move them both at the same time, save me a little time. That was the initial intention. Let's try that over here with the edge loop tool and using scale this time instead of transform. So I grabbed my scale tool, I activated the transform constraint edge slide, and let's go ahead and try scaling this on the x-axis. Ooh, no, that is not giving me the same response, unfortunately. So instead, I will just move this edge by edge. So in this instance, doing this with the edge loop tools multiplier did not save me any time. But it was still a cool option to show you how this transform constraint works. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and I'm going to turn off the Modeler's Toolkit and go back to my channel box. Alright, so now we've got the inside lip of this crate fenced. I press 3 and it's starting to look pretty good. Let's go ahead and reset that insert edge loop tool, and let's go over here and reinforce this edge. All of this is looking good. Press 3, loving it. Go down here and let's reinforce this corner. And let's reinforce here. And then once more here. So because these edge loops to the left and the right were created earlier, they went ahead and wrapped down all the way to the bottom corner. So we only had to add one more edge loop there. Let's go ahead and press F8 and press 3. And boom, that's looking really nice. It's good and angular, and it maintained that bevel that we had wanted there in the first place. Alright, so we've got the edges of this crate ready to rock. Let's go ahead and go over here and handle what's going on with this extruded area, this part that we pushed inward. Alright, let's start from this corner. And I'm thinking I want to go ahead and just use the regular edge loop again. Let's do that over here. And that should reinforce this corner nicely. Let's go over here where it's dipping in. Add an edge loop there and an edge loop there. Alright, so now we've reinforced this corner and this corner. Let's press 3. Oh yes, that's working nicely. That's looking like it should. We could go ahead and, ooh, actually wait a minute. I am noticing a little bit of an issue right here. I don't know if you notice it. Let's click off of this. Yeah, it looks like it's pushing in. Oh, I forgot to reinforce these little edges here. Let me go ahead and double click this insert edge loop tool, grab the multiplier again, and let's just click right here, because I forgot you need to do it on the horizontal part, not just the vertical part here. We need to go over here. Alright, so let me grab the scale tool. Woo, the scale tool is way down here. Oh, it's because I left, did I leave the constraint on? No, I didn't. That's acting odd. Let's press undo and try that again. I should be able to insert edge loops and grab the scale tool. It's not behaving. Oh, it's because it's wrapping down here. Okay, so if I had just had this edge of the crate and it stopped instead of going inward, then scaling this apart would have worked. But because it's dipping inside, it's not going to work. So I'm going to press undo, double click my tool settings, and go back to the regular insert edge loop tool. So let's go this way, and we're going to push this one this way. All right, and now when I press 3, oh, that's a nice sharp corner instead of having that strange kind of inflated sense that it had before those edges were reinforced. Okay, I'm loving that. That's looking good. Let's go look at this corner here. Is this corner looking all right? It seems to be. All right, let's keep going down. How about over here? Is this looking all right? I think it's looking all right. Keep going down. Let's look at this corner here. No, that is not quite doing good. So I see that we need to have an edge loop here. So it's kind of creating a little box right there. And we need one here. There we go. Let's see how that looks. Oh, much better. Okay, yeah, that is doing it. Yay. All right, let's go ahead and take care of this other portion that we extruded inward earlier. We'll start here, kind of reinforce those edges, that corner right there. And let's go ahead and do that again here. And then let's go ahead and this time we can double click the edge loop tool, use multiple edge loops, because there's nothing that's pushing like into an extruded area. It's just wrapping around on the, pretty geometric. I'm going to go ahead and grab the scale tool, and if I push it out this time, it does a great job of just equally pushing those edges apart, just to save a little time. I mean, honestly, it's not a huge time saver right now, but if I was in the midst of the project and not, slowly explaining my process, it might. So let's go over here. All right, so we've got another edge that we're going to have to go ahead and reinforce. So let's go ahead and do that. Now there are faster ways to get this effect, and there are other tools that we could talk about, like creasing. But creasing doesn't work for all game engines, so if you're building a game asset, it's much better to just fence a high poly than it is to use something like the crease tool. At least that is what I have experienced. But you could use something like the crease tool, which I can explain in a later tutorial. We could use something like the crease tool as a means to, get a sharper edge without adding a whole bunch of geometry. So I think that is looking all right. This corner here is a bit tricky because it only has one reinforced edge. We need to go ahead and reinforce this other edge. Much better. I feel like this edge loop could be a little closer. So I could double click this, go over to my transform constraint, grab that edge, and that way when I move this, it doesn't distort any of the geometry. Just that a little sharper. Yeah, loving it. All right, so let's go in and double check everything because we didn't do that in as clean an order as the other parts. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, that looks pretty well reinforced. Good, 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 good. Looks good, looks good. All right, and now let's go ahead and turn off the wireframe on shading. Click on this and press 3. Yay! There we go. It looks really good. It's matching the reference image as opposed to looking like melted ice cream. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off this transform constraint and say bye to the modeling toolkit again. I'm going to delete my history because that's kind of starting to stack up. And I'm going to go ahead and mirror geometry and get this back to the way it should look. So I'm going to shift right click and I'm going to go into my mirror settings. Copy is what I want. Over the world axis is great. Let's go ahead and do it over the Z axis. So as you can see, we're kind of pointing toward this axis. So that's Z. Combine with original, sure. We can go ahead and merge border vertices. That'd be awesome. Not always awesome, especially if you have a mesh where the edge loops are super close together when you're mirroring, because then the merged vertices can be a little bit sketchy as far as how it interprets that. But this, with the edge loop being so far away from all these other details, it's not going to be a problem to go ahead and merge those vertices. So let's press apply. All right, looking good. And we can just double check that this merge happened well just by grabbing this center edge and making sure that that's looking good, and it is. Perfect. Let's go back into object mode, which is F8, and this time we're going to merge over the x-axis. Apply. Cool, cool. And once everything is looking good, we can get rid of these edges along the top and along the side because they're redundant. We don't need them. They're not there for structural reasons. They were just there for the mirroring of geometry. Press F8. And there we go. Now, just to give you a feel, because this isn't even smoothed yet, but all these extra edges that we've added have exponentially increased the face count. So our low poly face count on the crate low, so it doesn't allow me to just select it. Let's go ahead and turn this back on for a moment. And let's grab the low poly crate. So the low poly crate, and I'll press Control 1, that puts us in solo mode. And so the only thing we're looking at is the low poly crate. As you can see, it's about 254 faces. All right, let's go ahead and turn that off. Grab this group. And then in comparison, this is 2,286 faces. A little bit different, a little bit of a higher poly count. Okay. So now that we've got the crate itself done, I'll go ahead and delete history. Maybe, well, why has this got some transformation differences? Did I move anything? No, maybe I did move something. Let's make sure that I did not move any geometry. I'm going to go ahead and activate that low poly box again. Let's go ahead and just turn that group back on. I want to make sure that everything is lined up correctly. So let's grab the high poly box and let's confused. And now it's not showing any sort of geometry change. I must be losing my mind. Oh, there's the crate high. Okay, sorry. Crate high does show some movement. If I push 0 on this, it moves away from the low poly. Okay, so that must have been just something that I had adjusted or changed when I was mirroring. Not a big deal. I just wanted to double check that the low poly and the high poly are still friends, that they're still sharing the same space. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off that low poly group, back to the high poly group, and let's freeze transformations. So freezing transformations, as you can see, goes ahead and puts all of this back to 0, which is what we want. We want to make sure that if we were to move this or rotate it in our scene, that we can always ask it to go back to the middle. Okay? So we are done with the crate. Let's move on to the other portions. And honestly, this tutorial is running a little long, so I'm going to stop it. And we will, in our next video, continue reinforcing and fencing up these edges.